What on earth is going on here? How are we meant to take anything out of this Mishnah? I'm not sure if anyone has any gleanings of wisdom at the moment. It seems quite a difficult Mishnah, especially to start our week with. I mean, imagine that, talking about swords, war, pestilence, droughts, famine. I mean, this is hectic stuff. How do we galvanize anything from this Mishnah? So let's start off initially with the few hints that are mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah. And these are primarily brought by the Midrash Shmuel, which has beautiful interpretations that are brought onto this or into this Mishnah. Let's have a look. He starts off by revealing the source of all affliction in a person's life. And the source of all affliction in a person's life is essentially themselves, in which he defines the coming of affliction as found in the word ba'in. Shiva mine faranios ba'in le'olam. Al shiva gufei aveira. 7 forms of affliction come into the world, ba'in, come upon the world. Now, he points out that it doesn't use the terminology of mevi'in, are brought into the world, but it says that they almost come into the world. And he says, how do they come into the world? It's not that Hashem is moilichin, Hashem sends them. It's not that he's mevi'in, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu from above, decides, it's like, I'm going to just throw a few of these spices, we'll throw a bit of cayenne pepper into the world, a little bit of whatever it is into the world to create havoc. That's not how it works. He says that we are the source of affliction. Ba'in. We are the source of all affliction in our own lives. Yeah. I heard a talk recently by a rabbi called Rabbi Taub, and he says, the first thing you see when you look in the mirror, you see yourself almost trying to wake up, there should be a sign that says, warning, you are the only individual that you're going to encounter that is the most dangerous force in your life. You are the most dangerous person in your entire life. Everything stems from you in terms of affliction. You are the person that creates difficulty in your own life. And that's what he's saying here. Ba'in, he brings a beautiful interpretation into the famous psalm of King David. Gam ki elech begates hamalves. Gam ki elech, even when I walk through the valley of death. Yeah. So he says, even when I walk, meaning who's walking through the valley of death? Yourself, you. You're the one that makes yourself walk through the valley of death. No one else. Gam ki elech, it's not gam she'moilichin, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sending you through the valley of death. Not when, gosh, I have to walk through the valley of death because God made me. No. Gam ki elech, it's even when I walk through the valley of death. I'm the source of all my valley of death, God forbid. I'm the one that walks through that valley. So he says here, Al shiva gufei aveira. They come from 7 bodies of sin, to which he illuminates a very interesting concept of how sin or how punishment comes into the world. Okay? Punishment, we understand nothing bad comes from Hashem. It's impossible for evil to come from God. There's no concept of evil. There's no concept of negativity. Now, where Christian theology falters in saying, well, there's a separate force from God, where there's God and then there's Satan. We understand that is essentially flawed to say that God, the omnipresence, is somewhat separated and unable to engage or unable to have dominion over something in the world is essentially illogical. So we understand that everything essentially is created and within the control of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how do we understand the source of affliction in this world? Can we imagine that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to suffer? that if Hashem is not the one sending it into this world, how do we engage with affliction? Okay, so it's hinted to here in the terminology of gufei avera. A guf is a body, okay, a body. And where we saw previously in the two Mishnayos before, where it talked about 10 things being created, or 14, we eventuated in the discovering 14 things created, Bein Hashmoshes, in twilight. One of them were the Mazikin, the demonic forces, or the harmful spirits. And it says that God, according to the Zohar, created harmful spirits, almost energies of negativity. Now, these energies of negativity can't do anything to us. They can't do anything to us unless we create a vehicle for them to do so. Unless we create a body, so to speak, for them to manifest within, to now create difficulty or some form of harm within our lives, God forbid. So what we're seeing here is we have these energies, we have these spirits, but we are the ones that allow them to manifest through the body that we create for them through these essential sins that we're going to investigate into. So we are the source, so to speak, of affliction. We are the source. We are the ones that bring that into our own lives and into the lives of this world, to the experience of this world. Okay, that's what we're understanding here. So yes, Hashem had to create what we want to refer to as a yin and yang, to create a circumstance of awakening, which the Midrash Shmuel explains. He says, what is the purpose of sin? What is the purpose of punishment and affliction? Well, it's like anything in life. If an individual has some form of an infection in their body, God forbid, well, the infection starts to hurt. There's some type of uncomfortable experience there. You know, there's some cyst that doesn't feel very pleasant to number one, look at or even engage with or feel that energy there. Why? Because the body is indicating that there is something problematic that needs to be addressed. And that's the way that we understand affliction in life. Anytime a person feels a sense of abrasiveness, a person feels a sense of pain, a person feels that they're experiencing paronios, a form of punishment or affliction, essentially the only purpose of that is to create an awakening for the individual, almost as if you can imagine a person traveling on the highway and you have those little little things positioned on the road that if people start falling asleep and veering off, they feel the tires going on those things, waking them up. You know, you don't start complaining about those things. Those things are there to wake you up, to get back on track. Same too, a person needs to welcome and create a state of deep consciousness and awakening through any forms of affliction, to understand that they are there to create an awakening from within, that the person needs to say, oh, wow, this is happening to me because I've lost track of who I am, what the definition of me is, okay? So that's what we're understanding, all right? Let's carry on and now investigate the 7 elements here of affliction. Miktzosen ma'asrin and miktzosen eina ma'asrin. A portion of individuals bring meiser. They bring a portion of their food, 10% of their earnings to charity, and a portion don't. And what happens, it says, Rav Shabbat ba, a famine of drought ensues. Miktzosen Raven, Miktzosen Svein. A portion of the individuals, those who brought charity, those who brought 10%, are fulfilled, are full, and the individuals that didn't, that refrained from doing so, that just kept it for themselves, are essentially hungry. They go famished. So let's try and understand what it means to bring meiser. And we know that the Torah tells us that found in the word meiser is the word oisher, Yeah, Eser, which is 10, also is associated with the word Oisher. If you spell the letter sin as a shin, it means wealth. That it says essentially that one can bring or tithe their produce and access a state of wealth. So now, not only literally does it mean that in a person's own engagement and success, that a person will see wealth and dividends coming from their tithing, but we see here a very, very deep intrinsic realization that comes from the process of bringing Meiser. Okay, and what is that? Let's try and understand how that works. So I saw a beautiful, beautiful insight, which we'll hopefully learn this afternoon or this evening, by Rav Shimon Shkop in his introduction to a book that he wrote. And he speaks there about the role of bringing or tithing. And he says that it is so intrinsically and inextricably linked to our definition of self, to the terminology of the I, in inverted commas. Who are we? So where he explains most individuals define their I by a state of physicality, by their appearance, by what they own, by the externalities that surround them. That's how most people engage with their eyes. Yeah, how do I look in my photos? What type of car do I drive? What type of physical appearance do I present, etc., etc. Yeah. So these are referred to as the definition of the I. Most individuals engage with that. Then a person can evolve to realize that their I also includes their spiritual self, their emotional self, which is a form of the spirit. The deeper self may also exist within the individual, and they can enter into a deeper state of being of themselves as well. Then a person can expand their I even further to say, who am I? And this is a very novel concept, what he shares with us here. Who am I? So he says, your I doesn't need to stop with your body and your soul. He says that there are individuals who define their I by the entire nation, by all of the Jewish people. Who am I? I'm the entire Am Yisrael. That's who I am. I don't say that, who am I? I am a limb. My arm is me. No, it's not just my arm. My other arm's also me. My body's also me. My leg's also me. So when I look at the Jewish nation, imagine the expansivity that a person experiences when they say, my I is not only defined by this specific structure that I have now, but it is so expansive that it includes all people. That's I. That's who I am. Everyone. That's an amazing concept. Then he goes even a step further to say there are some individuals that define their I by including everything in this world. Everything. All the nations of the world, everything in this world is their I. So when they're walking around in the street, everything is me. I'm not defined just by this. It's not saying, oh, everything is mine. It's saying I am everything. I'm not defined just by this structure here, but I'm beyond that boundary. There's something that goes so expansive to include everything that a person almost dissolves the skin, the boundary of their skin, to include everything in their eye. Now, when a person enters into that state, they also enter into a very deep, satiating framework of existence, where a person who is somewhat trapped by the boundary of their flesh is also trapped with the feelings of not feeling satiated. Because when a person is trying to define themselves by their appearance, by what they own, then they are constantly hungry. They're in a state of deep, deep thirst and hunger to discover the self. To say that it doesn't matter how much a person owns, they are always hungry for more. because the I is not essentially discovered. That if a person has not come to an awareness of the deeper self, the deep silent expansivity that is found within, then they're constantly going to be thirsting for that discovery without ever feeling satiated. And it almost becomes even more frustrating. The more a person has, the more existential loss and deep sense of a vacuumed emptiness of self they discover. And that's a very frustrating place to be in. So now how that ties into this first element, which we'll probably only have time to deal with, is that what does it mean that famine from drought ensues and that a portion of individuals are hungry and a portion are satisfied? Is to say the following, that an individual enters into a state of feeling fulfilled, a state of feeling satiated, when they dissolve the boundaries of their definition of self, when they enter into the expansive I as opposed to the external boundaried I. And the way that a person can do that is through tzedakah, is through chesed, is by giving of their own, by giving of themselves, by giving of their finances, of their own earnings, so to speak, to another, to charity. How do you do that if you don't define yourself by those individuals as well? If a person comes along and says, this is mine, this is who I am, why do I have to give it to you? You're right, you can't. But by giving of yours, of what you define as yours, to another, it essentially dissolves the externality and allows a person to say, I am an expansive I. Through that discovery, a person is able to enter into a deep state of satiation. Now, the unique concept here, which is associated with the concept of drought, which comes from a lack of rain, is the following. When a person starts to define themselves as a separate entity to this world, then the world becomes abrasive. The world becomes something that fights against the individual. When a person relinquishes their identity to the world, that they see themselves as a limb of the world itself, a limb of life itself, a limb of existence itself, as opposed to a separate entity to the world, to life, then the world starts to work in their favor. The world starts, imagine my arm, didn't want to work along with my body. It just did its own thing. You sometimes have that when you wake up after sleeping on a limb, the limb is dead. It almost can't function. Now, in that state, the limb is quite susceptible to harm. You could stub your foot, you can knock into something, you can lose, blood flow to that area, which is dangerous. Same too, when we become somewhat removed from the essential self, the expansive self of this world, we enter into the troubles of this world. The world starts to become abrasive. As opposed to when an individual sees himself as this expansive I, that the whole world, even the nations of the world, define me as well. I'm part of that. The world starts to work in our favor. It starts to rain. The world starts to want to facilitate blessing as opposed to create drought. Understand? So that's the first recognition. And just to recap, we've discovered here from this Mishnah that we are the source of our poronios. We are, no one else can create harm in our lives. How we interpret things is the pain that we feel. So when you have an abrasive experience, your ego interprets that experience and then creates a state of pain. When you have a situation in life which feels abrasive and negative, and then you interpret it, oh, Gewalt, so horrible. I can't believe I have to go through this. Can't believe this happened to me. I am the source of my problems. I am the source of my negativity. And that's what we're seeing here, that we bring our walking through the valley of death. We are the ones that walk through that valley. No one else causes us to walk through that. And we consider the concept of creating a body for those harmful spirits. sins, so to speak, which stem from our ego, which stems from a constricted state of being, a egoic state of mindset, are what create the body for the harmful spirits. And the first category of that is the definition of self. Do we see ourselves as the expansive I, the I that includes everything? Or do we limit our I to a very constricted reality of our appearance and what we own, and maybe even extending into our soul? You know, that's maybe a little bit more expanded. But what we're seeing here is to be able to see our I as everyone, as part and parcel of life, as a limb of existence, allows a person to really tap into the nutritious experience of life and allows them to feel full. When a person constricts themselves, they're walking the streets thinking, oh gosh, they're miffed constantly, you know, this is not working my way, this is not going my way. So essentially they can't galvanize the spiritual nutrients and the depth and the beauty of life, to see life in the most beautiful way and be full through the experience of life, as opposed to what's taking place here, where they're just constantly worrying and feeling negative and feeling as if life is not supporting them. Yeah. So that's the first realization that we've engaged with this Mishnah. We've got a few moments for any questions. I'll let you unmute yourself if you have a question, and we'll see what takes place. Allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay. Any questions? Yes, Philip.
Me.
Yes, you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, Rabbi, this whole story about God is only good and everything. And then why does he allow people to get sick and allow the Holocaust and all these other things that you know, if it's only good, then we should be only good. We should only be good all our lives, but we are not. We've got
so what I understand here, Philip, is just like, you know, I often engage with my kids. You know, one of the worst ways to teach your kids is to do everything for them. Okay. And one of the ways that I teach my kids is I say, you do it. You do. I'll watch you, and I'll watch them make mistakes and then have to suffer the consequences. Obviously, they're not drastic, dire consequences, you know. I'm not going to put them through something crazy. But the reason is because I want them to learn. I want them to figure out, you know, if you're not careful when you pour your milk, it's going to go all over the table. And then the consequence of that is that you're going to have to take time to clean it up. So if you don't do it carefully, you know, in the first place, then there are bigger consequences. Now, again, we can't enter into such drastic understandings of things and afflictions such as the Holocaust. It's beyond our comprehension. But what we can do is understand that Hashem in our own lives allows us to make mistakes. And we have to learn from those mistakes.